This is the Great One Piece Readthrough. This is our second episode covering volumes 7 through 12. My name is Zach.
And my name is Ed.
On today's episode, we have a very special guest, the translator for One Piece in Weekly Shonen Jump. We have Stephen Paul. Hey, Stephen.
Hi, guys. It's good to be here.
Joining us again, we have Bryan Newton, the animation director for Rick and Morty. Hey, Bryan.
It's a me. It's a Bryan.
And joining us as our special guest this week, we have Miles Thomas, who is the brand manager and convention manager for Crunchyroll. Hey, Miles, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful over in not so sunny Atlanta, Georgia today.
So you're there for MomoCon. So you're
That's
doing
right.
You're doing your convention duties there. How's it? How's your experience been at Crunchyroll? You've been doing this for around 8 months. You said, I think.
That's right. I've been with Crunchyroll for 2 years doing conventions, but they made me full-time convention manager after a year and a half of, I guess, convincing people to watch anime legally. So,
so how's that all been going?
It's been wonderful. I mean, a lot of people call Crunchyroll a dream job, and I'm definitely one of them. It's really nice being able to turn my hobby into a career. Absolutely, and share that with other people for a living. So.
We try and do that too. Just with one show though, we don't have the full reach to do all of them.
Not like 40 new shows every 3 months.
Exactly. But that doesn't happen to anyone. I doubt it. So we're here to talk about One Piece, and I want to go through your background with it. So how did you first get into it?
So my best friend on the internet, like everyone. I don't know about you guys, but I grew up in a time when it was very likely you had an internet best friend in addition to a real best friend. And she would hound me every day to watch One Piece. And I had watched the 4Kids version when I was a kid, and I had kind of been a little apprehensive about it. But I listened to all of her other recommendations. So she told me to watch Gintama, and she said, if you like Gintama, you'll like One Piece. And I went straight into One Piece, barreled through. I think we were at Sabaody Archipelago at that point, so I made it all the way to there in just the anime within 50 days.
Yeah, you're with me. I think we watched around the same time. Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
That is.
I mean, that was like 10 episodes. It was my life, and then it didn't stop. And then
tell me about it.
I did a similar thing. It was just, there was a lot less episodes back in 2006.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. That's what One Piece does to you. You can't stop. Once you're involved, it doesn't go away very easily.
So what was your experience once you caught up? What parts do you, what do you love about it? And where are you with it today?
So I am, in short, behind. Just having to watch anime for a living. Not having to, but getting to watch anime for a living means I need to keep up with the simulcasts and all that sort of thing. So I'm about a year and a half behind on One Piece, or a year, something like that. I'm on the current arc of the manga. I've been reading on the Shonen Jump website, and it's pretty good. I love it, and I've been behind because of everything else, but I spent years on Arlong Parks. I was very active over there. I went to Davy Back fights at anime conventions back 2009, 2010, around then. And
the good old days.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And I've been to a single One Piece podcast panel, and I had a great time, won a prize.
Which one? It was Anime Central, you said, right?
I think it was Anime Central. Yeah.
Cool. I love that con.
Probably Anime Central 2010. It was the first year, and I couldn't go because I went to a wedding.
That sounds right. 2010. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you being at a wedding.
I think we went. Yeah, I think we went to like 13 conventions in like 10 months.
Yeah, it's not. Well, I'm sure Miles is doing more than that.
Maybe.
So why don't we talk a little bit about what we're covering today, and we're gonna finish up Baratie. We got to talk about the exciting part, Miles. I mean, if there's stuff you want to talk about with it, that's fine with Mihawk. But what did you guys think going through Baratie again? Ed, if you want to start.
And I think I mentioned this later on in our Reverie segment, but I think this applies. It's not just a spoilery thing. I can talk about it here too. Is that a lot of East Blue is concerned with defining what pirates are and what pirates aren't. And I think we're establishing that a pirate isn't someone who relies on his accoutrements, his outward, he doesn't rely on gimmicks, basically. Don Krieg is the ultimate gimmick guy. He believes in trickery. He believes in, dirty dealing. He believes in having more military power than anybody else. He has 50 ships and 5,000 men and solid gold armor. And
well, the 50 ships aren't in very good condition.
Right. And he's got a giant battle spear up his butt or something.
Yeah.
And
I don't think that's where it was.
all Luffy has is grit and belief in himself. And this isn't something that it's not revisited a lot later on, I think, because on the Grand Line, all the pirates, they have that grit, they have strength internally, or at least they have really, really powerful tricks, like some other pirates. But it's just we really establish how much Luffy believes in himself, especially in this arc. It's really, really emphasized.
It's very much about inner fiber over outward appearances and. Even like Dunker, even though he's about trickery, he's also when all the cards are on the table, he's like you said, he's the guy with the giant armor and the huge exploding spear weapon, and it's all kind of a show for him.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, to be fair, Don Krieg's no pushover. He took a lot of hard hits before he actually finally went down.
Mm-hmm. And his crew did too. I mean, even Pearl, who we make fun of a lot.
Pearl's insane.
Pearl is literally insane, which I think I don't think I really appreciated this arc as much in the anime. My first time through. We're going to talk a lot about differences, and in these early ones, there's a lot of good differences too. But
I think the thing with the spear goes on forever in the anime. It seems like it goes on forever, but in here, I think he takes 2 shots from it.
Yeah, I think this stuff, the post Mihawk Baratie stuff goes a lot faster in the manga, and it's just a lot more exciting. And maybe it's also because I took a little bit of a break after Mihawk before going into this stuff, and Mihawk gets you all hyped up and oh, this is crazy. And then I think we talked about this a little last time. This is just bringing you down back to the reality where we are at the moment, which could be a little bit disappointing. But I think Pearl and Geen and all the little, even all of Don Krieg's little pirates, which are all ridiculous in their own way, is a lot of fun to read.
Yeah,
and I really think that Oda designed the fight with Krieg, the post Mihawk fight, especially to highlight the dangers of devil fruits, because of the way with the debris and the water and the ever-present danger of falling into the water. And it wasn't really something that was explored in Kuro, because that was almost entirely on land, and I think Buggy was as well.
They all were, I think. I mean, in the anime, Alvita was on a boat, but the rest of them.
This really frames your perception for the rest of the series of water being this huge danger. I mean, it's like you guys said, it's not a big deal before, but after this, you always have that in the back of your mind. Every ship battle becomes do not fall and do not turn into a hammer.
And does he falls in once toward the end, I think?
Sanji has to go get him, yeah.
Yeah, and I like that actually happens, because I think that's the first time we see I think that's the first time we see him hammering. Guess is the word I'll call it.
Yeah. The one thing that really stuck out to me when I was first reading this stuff is, like you said, there's a little bit of come down after the high of the Mihawk stuff. But I think the conclusion to the Krieg stuff on the Baratie kind of gets by because it's really brutal. It's way just kind of nastier and more
bloody. It's bloody. Yeah.
Luffy punching the spiked cloak thing, and just
he gets stabbed repeatedly by the
right.
We really see a lot of Luffy's innovative fighting with his devil fruit. He gets the giant gavel where he does the twisting thing and hits him, grabs him with his feet and twists his legs and spirals him into the deck.
I think this is probably... Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Sorry. I think even not just with the devil's fruit, but how to fight as well. He also kicked the water to cause a deterrent for Don Krieg. through the mass so that Krieg would burn it, that he'd be able to strike at him later. We see Luffy better as not just being able to overpower an opponent, but also to outthink them in a fight, which is
but you can't really
handy for him later.
Like how good the overpowering thing is, because spike arm or whatever, Luffy punches through it. Again, it's the whole thing with the gimmick. It doesn't matter if you have a gimmick if you have more brute courage.
Yeah,
grit, I think is
grit. Yeah, that's
the word we're using. This is definitely one of the most brutal arcs that I could think of just consistently. I mean, Sanji gets beat up by Gin. Gin gets beat up by everyone.
Gin takes a poison directly to his face.
And I guess I don't know when to bring this up, but it's definitely something I want to talk about because I think I've got a new appreciation for this. I don't remember if I read it or not in the manga before this read it through, is Sanji's flashback, which is as brutal comes. I think it's not like later ones we get, without saying anything specific, which are just more heartbreaking. This one's just is tough. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, I mean, like when I first read this, it showed the level of dedication characters will have for each other in the series. Like we already saw Shanks lose his arm in the very first chapter, but at this point, and I know what we're referring to, when Chef Zeph literally takes his leg off and eats it in order for Sanji to preserve himself while they were trapped on that island, was kind of like one of the most like touching and endearing things for characters to have. And in comparison to the anime where that didn't happen, they had to censor that, I guess, because it's kind of brutal. It's kind of brutal.
It is.
It's horrifying.
Yeah.
And I think he mentions it in SBS. It's like, look, we can't have little kids watching, or more broader audience. I think Oda says, watching a guy eat his own foot. I mean, we don't see him eat his own foot, but even imply it, I guess. What happened in the anime again? I'm trying to remember. I haven't seen this episode in a little while.
Zeph lost his leg when he was rescuing Sanji from the water.
It got tangled in the chain, in the anchor chain, I think.
It's not terrible. Yeah. I mean, if you're gonna, I remember that. And he cut it off.
It's a way of saving Sanji when he goes down to the water, but it's almost semi-accidental. There's something so deliberate about giving Sanji all of the food and like taking the big bag, but it's actually all full of treasure for yourself. But you realize that you're going to have to hack off your own leg in order to survive. As you said, brutality is the order of the day.
It's even sadder than that. Literally, I don't think Zeph was expected to live. So that, like, if they got rescued, Sanji had the best chance of surviving. They go check on Zeph, and he's dead with a bunch of treasure next to him. It's almost like he was giving that to Sanji as well.
It's so much more brutal, and I think the days thing works a little better because you have the boxes 23 days, 24, and you're like, oh shit, I can't live without food for that.
Yeah,
I have 5 days worth of food.
That's why he eats his own leg, and I think that also is interesting that it ties back into this is about a chef. This is about people who care about food, and he's eating his own leg. He's literally eating his sacrifice for Sanji, and I think that's really interesting.
So any other thoughts? I mean, I think it all comes to... Yeah, but before we get to the SBS, sorry, Ed. I think it's really great how it comes together at the very end of the arc, I do want to mention, with just that goodbye where it's like, get the hell out of here, no one cares about you. But then they, of course, break down in man tears, I think.
Well, it's like a whole chapter of them trying to force them out. Your soup sucks and whatnot. And
then they're loudly talking.
This is great soup, Luffy said.
And they're loudly talking on the other side of the door, and Sanji's like, I could hear you guys. Yeah.
And I wanted to mention about the SBS later on, where Oda says, "No, I had him take the correct leg because the plant leg when you're kicking is much more important." So that's why he takes off his. I think he takes the left. He cuts off the left leg.
Yeah.
I also really enjoy.
I learned something from that.
At the end of the arc, it shows the shadow of the 7 warlords of the sea, and I really like coming back to that and seeing those very accurate outlines of characters.
When I first watched them, I'm like, this is what they're all going to look like, obviously.
Yeah, they're all going to be the same height and gender.
And they're all going to wear a coat and have very similar hairstyles.
And they're all going to be swordsmen.
And they're all going to be.
Besides the fact that none of them even looks like Mihawks, we should have known.
No,
from the
yeah, there
beginning.
should be like a giant sword, and no, it's not there.
It's the cover art, not final.
The thing is, I think. Well, no, I'm not going to get into that. That has nothing to do with this.
I just want to mention Geen a little bit, and that I was always surprised that he went back with Krieg afterwards. Was anyone else really surprised by that? Like I think it shows how honorable of a man that Geen is to keep. I have to go all in with this guy. I have to believe in him. Otherwise, what kind of pirate am I? And I think that's part of what goes into Sanji joining Luffy's crew, because he believes that Luffy is the man who'll be able to help him find All Blue. He believes in Luffy, and yeah.
Yeah, it just makes Don Krieg more of an asshole. Because like Krieg was loyal. Yeah, Krieg was loyal throughout. He just had the one thing he couldn't do, which was to kill Sanji, who was like the only person in his life who was kind to him. And he was like, Don Krieg, can we spare this one person, please? And Don Krieg, being a man of, uncompromising dickery, he just said, no, we got to slaughter them all. Yeah. And it just shows that Geen is actually a better, I guess, pirate or a person than Don Krieg ever will. Is like maybe he'll like take over the Don Krieg pirates going forward. We don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, pirate armada.
And I also have to really respect the fact that this, like, honestly, fairly minor character, like rereading this passage, I had almost forgotten about him, and he's just such an interesting character who's got a lot going on. I mean, his character arc is almost as important as Sanji's, I think.
Yeah, he really. I mean, this is a guy who clearly was not a good guy, and what a crazy roller coaster he goes on in this arc.
And it's believable still too. It's not like it's he's redeemed out of nowhere. No, he obviously doesn't end up all that redeemed, but he has this arc where he's really realizing what's important to him, and I don't know. I thought he was pretty exceptional for what at this point is a one-off character.
So let's get into, I think, what we're probably itching to talk about this week, and that's the Arlong Arc.
But a little bit before that, though, we do get an initial taste of Luffy's artwork. The drawing the merman.
Well, my favorite part of that scene is in the anime, which is Sanji's ridiculous laugh, which Ed, you could do perfectly. Let me just... No, it's a little higher pitch, but yeah, it's basically that.
It's just the 3 laugh.
And you never hear Sanji make that laugh again, and it doesn't. But it's one of my favorite scenes, and I think, it's just hilarious.
And Sanji smoking in his flashback. Now I am a man. The 10-year-old Sanji.
Oh my god, I forgot about that. It's a good reason that wasn't in the anime.
Yes, I just want to make sure I mentioned it because I found it ridiculous, and
but it's such a good character point though. Like Oda's the best with character quirks, and that was one I was like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean. Also, I think it makes sense with Oda, being a big smoker. I think he's not going to be.
It's in line with his SBS from later on in like volume 10 or 11 about the kid asks, "Aren't Zoro, Sanji, and Nami a little too young to be drinking?" And he says, "Yes, they are."
So let's talk about Arlong, and there are so many fun things to talk about with this. I don't even it's hard to know where to begin. I mean, first off, we left last time seeing Nami take the boat, and then Zoro and Usopp following, and with Johnny following after them. And what did you guys think of? I guess we should start just with the beginning of coming to Arlong Park.
I think it was really smart to have Usopp be kind of the guy who is on the ground, like running around. He's the one who first meets Nojiko and the kid, and I think it works as a really good. Usopp is like the audience surrogate type guy. He's the everyman, and I think it really helps to have that entrance to just the concept of fishmen, because everything, like every show of strength or whatever, he's just like freaking out because it's so much more extreme than a normal human's abilities. That I think that was actually a really good way to build up the dreads, especially since we don't even aside from seeing Arlong, the characters don't actually go to Arlong Park for a little while, and so you kind of get to build up this sense of dread about it.
Actually, the first thing we see about Arlong Park is Nojiko scaring a small child away from it.
Yeah,
and that comes back later on. It's actually a really, it's kind of a throwaway at the beginning of it, but when it comes back around during the party at the end or at the very end of the arc, it means a lot.
Well, we also see Usopp's both sides of him, his cowardly side and his when he stands up. I think at the beginning of Volume 9, he's like, I got to do something. I just can't watch this going on. So the Usopp on the ground stuff, I think, is great because you might be annoyed. I think a lot of people, when they first see Usopp, it's like, this is an annoying, whiny, scared guy all the time, but he really has his moments. Bryan, you were going to...
Oh, it was Nami who scared the kid away, not Nojiko.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because Nami at that point is known as the witch, or the witch of the Cocoa Village.
And we also, I love you kind of know Nami's not really completely a bad guy. Did any of you guys get tricked at any point originally reading or watching?
No.
No.
I saw the opening song. I know what it is.
I think I got fooled a little bit, especially with the wow.
That was my fault.
I got fooled a little bit just with the the stabbing scene with Usopp. Because I think that was really, really, really well done.
Yeah. I forgot about it reading again. I'm like, wait, how does I know this isn't what happens, but how does this get...
And it was actually, it kind of echoes an earlier scene because that was basically what happened with her in Buggy, where she had to shoot Zoro and she couldn't do it. So she, eventually she fights back against the Buggy pirates. Here she kind of acts it out. She pretends she's stabbing Usopp, but she's actually stabbing herself. Which I think in this case says more about, her ability, her commitment to the Straw Hats, even with this, quest kind of hanging over her to free her village, is that she would sacrifice herself that way.
It's funny how you mentioned the Buggy Arc. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, it's funny how you mentioned the Buggy Arc because her whole thing there was she didn't want to murder anyone, or else she'd be just like all the other pirates who we'll get to. Remove someone very important from her.
And then again,
I think that's key. I think that's
Go Miles, go ahead. Sorry
about that, guys. Again, with Zoro, she's not willing to watch him or to drown him. She's put him away in jail. And they'll get him later, and it's that same kind of there's some kind of allegiance going on there just under the surface, and enough that Arlong should be able to see it. But I definitely did as a viewer.
And that's what I was going to say about the about going back to Buggy. Like, her hatred of pirates, as demonstrated from the beginning, is what always had that seed of doubt in me about her being an actual betrayer.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Do you want to talk a little about Momu?
Well, yes, that is a topic of discussion that we must go through. Let's talk about Momu. What do you want to talk about Momu?
It's just the establishing even more so, because this is before we get the entire explanation about the calm belts that we get in Loguetown, that there are these gigantic monsters like the ones we saw in Chapter 1 that are going to be a semi-regular part of the series, and it widens the world. And when fishmen are introduced and the existence of mermaids and mermen are introduced as a real thing, it makes the world that much bigger, and you realize how small of a pond East Blue is and why Arlong might come there to dominate it.
I also think it's really good to contextualize all the other fishmen, just because we have Momu who's so weird. The design is so bizarre, and it kind of makes Arlong and everyone else seem a little more normal in comparison. And I think that's good to make them more human as characters.
I thought Hachi was probably the most, I don't want to say human, but the fisherman. But yeah, I think he was definitely the most quirky and fun of the, and kind of drawn out of the fisherman pirate, not fisherman, Arlong pirates at this point.
Momo's thing to go on what I was saying about Usopp, to him, the fishmen are just these objects of terror, and they're this dominating force. But then you have Luffy and Sanji who are coming up to the island on this little boat, and then you have this giant monster, and they're just beating the crap out of him. It's here come the cavalry. The big guns are coming to help sort things out. Yeah.
That's probably one of my favorite running gags as well. Just the beating up Momu and Sanji tricking him into, oh, it's fine, here's some food. No, I'll kill you.
I'll kick you twice.
I'll kick you twice.
No, the best was Sanji justifying the second kick. He was like, he was trying to eat me.
Go ahead.
It's also good for showing how powerful Arlong is, because Momu was destroyed by the Straw Hats already, and Arlong says, what do you think you're doing? And he just goes back and like, I guess I'll have to fight again, even though I know I'm going to get beat up.
Yep.
Yeah. And on Arlong, I'd like to point out the one of my favorite bits of the Arlong arc is Arlong's racism.
Oh yeah.
Towards humans specifically. Almost every Arlong line is about humans are inferior, humans are weak, fishmen are much stronger, fishmen can breathe underwater, that's why humans are weak.
Fishmen are the master race. He actually says
yes, the master race. Yeah, that was a great line. Yeah. And I love it because even at this point in the series, there's something that was wrong about that. Not just the fact that fishmen are superior, but the fact that through this entire series, we haven't seen hardly any other fishmen. So it's like, if you guys are so great, then where the hell are you? And I almost think Oda is trying to set up that the Grand Line might be just filled with fishmen, like all these powerful pirates. That's why it's the pirates' graveyard, because a human can't compete against creatures like that. So I always found that really interesting. The fact he's so kind of pro fishmen at the downplay of humans, that what's really going on in your head, Arlong? What are you trying to compensate for?
And it also makes him feel like that he can completely exploit humans for monetary gain. And that's basically his entire thing about going to the East Blue and getting the Marines, the Navy, under his thumb. He has Nezumi is a loyal customer, as they say. And when Pudding comes in, because someone got a message out to the Grand Line to Navy HQ, he wrecks them, basically. Takes them all the way down. And that's a Commodore. That's a much higher rank. Although
he definitely knows how the world works, and he's like, I'm going to exploit this to its benefit. I'll find the corrupt Marines, and I'll sink the ones who don't agree with me.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of we have an article on the site about this too, but it's that established kind of Yakuza kind of thing, where you've kind of infiltrated everything, and you've been there, and you're established, and you've been there. It's creepy, and I think one of the underlying things in this arc is just how could you be so evil and no one give a shit? Mm-hmm. We see people trying to give a shit and failing because he's relatively powerful, I think, is at least through this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's self-aware of his evilness, too. Do you think that you can use that girl as well as I do? He knows that he's treating these people like cockroaches. He calls them cockroaches. Mm-hmm. And I guess that adds to why he makes such a great villain, because he doesn't care that he's evil. Unlike, anyone else we've had up to this point, they're not so self-aware of their status within even the pirate community.
Well, I think his moral code, kind of touching also what Bryan said, is that who gives a shit about people? I could do whatever I want to them because I'm better than them. So I think he's justifying it. I don't think he would do that to another fisherman. I'll put it that way. I don't think he cares about. Maybe a little bit, because he is still a dick.
Well, maybe if he saw them as race traders.
Yeah, he cares about it. Yeah, he cares about his crew. Because remember when Luffy used one of the fishermen as a shield, and he got really upset over that, or when his officers were getting knocked out one after the other, he was pissed.
But with Momo,
he's how dare you humans do that to us? No, Momo's
not a fisherman. Yeah.
Before we get into the elephant in the room with Arlong,
family,
which is flashback, I do want to just talk about a little bit about how each Straw Hat kind of shines. Particularly Zoro at the beginning is just all types of badass, I think.
Oh yeah.
Miles, do you want to start with that?
This was the best Zoro moment we've had since the first time we saw him, where he's just, beat me up, throw me around, I don't care, I'm gonna stick to my guns.
Yeah. Or with the line of, what's with all the bandages? Oh, I ran out of clean laundry.
There we go.
One of my favorite lines in this show, I think I could say.
Yeah. And that is Zoro. That is the most Zoro thing we see, and it continues. It sets him up I know we're 8 volumes and 9 volumes in at that point, but it really does frame him for everything else One Piece has to offer.
Yeah, it's that kind of cocky arrogance that often gets him hurt.
And speaking of Zoro's fight with Hachi, there was one thing that was apparently a typo in one of the earlier editions. I think is the one I have.
Yeah, we heard about that.
Where Hachi says, "I am the second best swordsman on this island," but what he actually says is, "I'm the second best swordsman on Fishman Island," which is a foreshadowing.
Which is a nice setup, yes.
I love the other thing too about Hachi is he has, I think, the best line in this, which actually it was translated really well because it worked equally well in Japanese and English. But obviously the first time we see Hachi, he's kind of a more friendly figure because he doesn't realize Zoro is an enemy, and so he gives him the ride in the octopus pot.
Yeah.
And then later on, he's like, "Oh, that was Zoro all along." He's like, "He took me for a ride. I mean, I took him for a ride."
That does work. That does work.
Yeah, it does. No, I love what a funny scene where he's like, "Oh, I'm here to see Arlong." Yes, I guess. And Zoro's like clearly not even like doesn't give a shit about even lying about it, but it works so well. I love that.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about family and how you make one, Zach?
Is it 2 parts sugar, 4 part? What is it?
No, but it's the theme of this arc is that family is what you make it. Family is what you choose. It's not necessarily something you're born with.
I forgot how short this flashback was. I think it's only like a chapter and a half, 2 chapters, 3 chapters.
It's barely 2 chapters.
In the anime, it was a few episodes, right?
I think it's like maybe an episode and a half. I haven't seen it in a while, but it's not terribly long.
I'm going to check Crunchyroll.
I think it's just a really well paced thing because there's no filler and like everything that is in the flashback, like every panel, tells you something different, and it's very like sparingly told, but it tells you everything you need to know. I think it's very vivid in that sense.
Yeah, it's 2 episodes. Okay, so. Yeah,
and I think it's really the first flashback that kind of makes you feel the way that the One Piece flashbacks end up making you feel every time from here on out, where it's Oda really doesn't hold back. He'll save all of the emotional outcomes for these flashbacks rather than putting them in the main story, and I think that really works in setting up the characters. He earns it.
What an emotional punch in this one.
Oh my gosh.
And the fact that Luffy doesn't even hear it.
Same thing.
Luffy doesn't even hear it.
And Zoro doesn't hear it because Zoro falls asleep before it starts.
Maybe Zoro heard in REM sleep. I don't know. We can't say. We can't discount that.
That's true. Of course, REM sleep. They set it up so well. You see a little bit of their family life before things go to hell. And I love how they set up and it kind of is, as Miles said, representative of how we see arcs in the future. I think Miles, you said that. And the fact that you get all the minor characters set up, like Genzo, pre-Scars, just the Doctor, the other people that I can't remember the names of.
Yeah, and I love that we see Genzo getting his scars as a direct result of that. Like that's a great piece of character development there.
Yeah, but in the fact that Belmare was a Marine, she was this punk kid who became a Marine, and she brought home 2 kids from the battlefield. She was basically left for dead. These kids were left for dead. They found each other and they made a family. And Genzo and the Doctor, they try to provide a way out for them. Like, all you have to do is, deny that you're family. You were just having us over for dinner, and the kids can run away. The kids can be safe. But Belmare understands that you don't sell out your family, and this is it's really an important lesson for Nami to learn, because I feel like she's been betrayed and been abused for the last 10 years.
Yeah,
and it's that the fact that Belmare did that for her, it's the animating incident of her life.
And this is the definition of family that One Piece uses for the rest of the series. It's what, I guess Nakama, right? This is how the crew sees each other.
All right, bleep that, Zach.
Yeah, please do.
It's too late.
It's a dirty word, I understand. But but it does. Like the family, the sense of family that the crew has in later arcs is defined right here in this flashback.
Yeah, and it even works perfectly because if I'm going to also use Miles' phrase, when Arlong refers to Nami, he also says Nakama. He says shipmate, crewmate. So it's kind of like that extra sting that pissed Luffy off. He was like, you don't understand the meaning of the word.
Yeah. And the fact that after Belmere dies and Nami goes to work for Arlong, she is sacrificing herself so that people don't get hurt. And she realizes that she can't have friends, that she can't have people be close to her, people that she trusts, because they will get hurt. They will get killed by Arlong. She's not allowed to have that anymore. And it's the fact of her being able to, like Sanji did, believe in Luffy, that he is the guy who, he's the guy who's going to become king of the pirates, and she can believe in that, and then she can also believe that he will be the one to beat Arlong. So, and she asks him for help.
Yeah, and it's also great because I feel like the reason why the Arlong arc is so important, because this is what the entire series has culminated to this point. Like watching Luffy take down Buggy, Kuro, Krieg is just like him proving himself that he's superior, and like Arlong is the first threat they have from the Grand Line, so that's really important for Luffy and company.
I still don't believe that Luffy's more powerful than Arlong during this arc.
I think he is. I think the weird thing, it's not like Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball where it's like, I gotta fight and train more to get more powerful. I think Luffy starts the series pretty damn powerful because, he had been training for 10 years between when we see Shanks and when he sets off. And I don't think we've yet approached, besides Smoker a little later on, I don't think there's a villain here who is not within his caliber. I think one of my favorite lines that comes a little later in Arlong here is, look, I don't know how to navigate. I don't know how to, cut people. I don't know how to, whatever they each do. Cook.
I don't know how to cook.
Lie.
I don't know how to lie.
I don't know how to lie. And Usopp's like, hey, what? But and then he asks, what can you do? And he's like, I could kick your ass. And it's just, that, I think, out of all things, is the best encapsulation of what Luffy is capable of. And I think he can. I think, of course, I don't think Arlong and Luffy are, too far off from what they're capable of, but I think Luffy was that strong and is that strong that he could kick Arlong.
Well, and also Luffy is disabled significantly for part of this arc where he's well, until for like the middle third of it, he's stuck in the cement and thrown into the ocean,
where he is not breathing for 5 chapters.
But before we talk about the final fight between Luffy and Arlong, we should talk about Usopp in this arc, because I think Usopp actually has the most personal growth in his fight.
He does.
Where he runs away, and that's what he does. It's what he knows how to do. But then he's able to hide in the forest and fight off Chu. Is it Chu?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Chu. Yeah. I just do have to imagine that
exactly
his face.
And there's this scene with Usopp where he's thinking of the ways in which he will excuse his failure to beat Chu, and then he realizes what a fucking scumbag that would make him, and how bad of a crewmate that would make him. And he mans up and he beats the guy with fire and in his rubber bands and hammer. So.
Yeah, one of the most incredible turns in the series, because that moment is why Usopp's one of my favorite characters, because unlike Zoro, Sanji, and Luffy, you don't know how Usopp's going to win a fight. Mm-hmm. He's not as strong as everybody else. He will never be as strong as them. So he's like, I have to outthink these people. I have to outthink these monsters. Mm-hmm. And when and just to reiterate how he wins that fight, when he throws the grog, the alcohol, and then shoots the lead that spreads the alcohol across Chu, you just think like, oh, he's doing like a trickery move. He's doing a punk move. But you don't realize that's like the first 2 parts of his plan to finally light this guy on fire, since his initial fire star didn't work. He's like, hey, alcohol's flammable. And then he lights him on fire. It's such a great turn. Such an amazing turn.
Yeah. And one more thing that I wanted to mention is that Arlong really makes a really bad strategic mistake, kind of showing how he isn't very smart, in that he intends to have Nami working for him forever. But Nami believes that if she gets 100 million berries,
I want to touch on this,
and gives it to Arlong, that he will free her and free the well, not necessarily free her, but free the town at least. But then Nezumi shows up, and he's tipped off Nezumi that she has all this money, and without it, that was really the only thing binding her to him, was the hope that she had that the village would be free. And by taking that away from her, she really has nothing binding her to him except for fear. And the fact that she believes in Luffy and that Luffy can kick his ass is that's all she needs to ask for help. Is she believes that it can happen, so she asks for help.
That moment was so infuriating. Not like just like as a plot point. God, do you feel for Nami there? Because you also see her collecting it for a decent amount of time from Buggy on, and you see how important it is. And now you know how important it is because you went through that flashback that just brought it to such a fore. It's painful.
Yeah. He has some really, really great just illustrations of, when she is like possessed with fury. Like you've never seen Nami or, just about anyone except for maybe Luffy, that kind of angry up to this point in the series.
Right.
And
like when she's stabbing her shoulder.
Yeah.
From the tattoo on her arm. I'm just like, even in the anime, just the squishing noise that it makes, like when she's stabbing over and over and yelling Arlong, screaming Arlong. I'm just like, oh my God, this is almost as bad as taking your leg off and eating it.
almost. And I'm just looking at that panel where she's like reaching around at the scar, and you see Arlong cackling in the background, and
I almost believe she would have taken her arm off if Luffy didn't stop her.
Yeah, and it also harkens back to the fact that Nojiko got a tattoo of her own to, I think, to show Nami that she did still have someone that even if she couldn't be honest with the village and she was doing it for their sake, she was still able to be honest with Nojiko, and that was really Nojiko's way of reciprocating, sort of becoming a marked woman, because the tattoos in Japanese culture have a different meaning than they do in American culture.
This arc, in addition to family, it's also very much about strong female characters, strong women, because that's Belmare's thing about, I want to raise daughters who can be strong in this era.
Yeah.
And Nojiko and Nami represent that perfectly.
I also want to mention the overtaken scene, as we often call it, which is probably one of the most iconic scenes. And it also comes, I think, the chapter. I can
hear the music with you just saying it.
And it also comes with, I think, that the color spread and the other page, I think, that's been mentioned a lot on Twitter of the Get Ready or Start Up or
Okay, Let's Stand Up.
Okay, Let's Stand Up. This is clearly a very big moment. Stand by that one. Sorry.
And if you think about that scene, you realize that Luffy isn't wearing his hat in that scene because he's given the hat to Nami.
Yeah, and I mean, what did you guys think, the manga compared to the anime, and just this scene as it affected you first? Miles, if you want to start.
I mean, I mentioned the music because this is really where the soundtrack of One Piece really started to be something that I resonated with me, and every time I heard it from here on out, I'm like, this is bringing me back to these moments. I guess that's kind of the advantage of anime in this regard. The manga is excellent. Just like I said, I was rereading it for this show, and the scene has just as much power in as it does in the anime, but I was tempted to just open up my computer to that song.
with good reason. Steven.
Actually, it's been a while since I've seen the anime episodes, so I don't remember that particularly well as far as the changes that they might have done. But the whole sequence, just from the moment of betrayal to her just kind of letting it all out. She has this just cathartic rage, and then pleading for help, and finding out that everyone else has her back. Going right up to the basically Luffy kicking down the door and punching Arlong it's absolutely an iconic sequence, and definitely one of my favorites. Favorite part of this arc.
It gives me chills just looking at these pages. Any other final thoughts about the Arlong arc? I really think we could talk about this all day.
You want to talk about the fight between Luffy and Arlong a little bit, and like the end of it and the end of the arc?
As long as we start from after he was stuck in the water.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really kinetic fight, and I think it actually progresses. It seems to progress faster in the manga because they don't have to stretch things out for the anime, basically.
Is that a pun?
Yes, it was. Totally on purpose. But the end of the fight with and they do all the shenanigans with the teeth and the sword, but getting up into that map room and just him destroying her life's work. There's nothing tying her, nothing at all tying her to this man anymore, this fish man.
That was
but it was still
amazing.
so devastating.
That was a really clever turn.
Yeah.
And just destroying the symbol of
her toil, her servitude,
but also destroying Arlong Park too.
Yeah,
for all of the citizens, and not just. It's like doing that for everybody was like the giant version of destroying the map room. Only Nami knew what that meant, but destroying Arlong Park destroys the idea that he is going to oppress you. He's going to be dominating you from now on.
And with Greg last week, we talked a little bit about the everyman in One Piece. All the little background characters, essentially. And I think Arlong Park does an exceptionally good job with that, because they're all ready to go in. They're literally marched, the entire village marches to Arlong Park ready to try and kick his ass with no chance whatsoever. I think that just really shows a lot of gumption from that entire town. It's a really cool scene, or set of scenes.
I love the fact that Zoro was able to do this entire arc with all of his wounds from the Mihawk fights.
Well, he does fall asleep in the middle, and the doctor does have to give him some crazy ass stitches.
Yeah.
He does not look good. It's shocking how he survived all of that. And I love how it all wraps up at the end. You get the windmill explanation, which Luffy was very obsessed with. Obviously, he uses that as one of his moves.
I love that. I love that reveal.
And it's really sort of a tacit acknowledgement that Genzo is a lot like Nami's father, because you get pinwheel plus tangerine equals tattoo, and it's the mother and the father.
Yeah, it's a really, really well drawn character arc, probably one of the best in such a short period of time. I think it's like 2 volumes, 2.5.
Yeah.
They do a great job with it.
Just want to mention one of my favorite lines here from right before, I think, the end of the Luffy Arlong fight, where Zoro says, "If you die, I'll kill you." Luffy. Everyone has quips, I think, right in that scene, but his is the best.
And we talked about Sanji's goodbye. Nami's goodbye is stealing everyone's wallet. Which I guess is equally good.
It's great, because not only are they cursing her out as she's sailing, but they're also saying, "Come back soon. We miss you. Thanks for saving us.
Can I have my wallet back?"
Yeah, and it's a great.
I guess you don't need a photo ID.
Yeah, it's a great way to just in one little scene, like one page, to point out okay, so Nami doesn't need to raise 100 million berries anymore, but she's still Nami. She's still the thief. Yeah. That's her character. That's in her nature. Just because the quest is over.
Mm-hmm. And I like the fact that as that ends, we see how Nezumi's grudge against Luffy really does kind of explain his bounty. Why it's so high. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that part. But also, I want to mention the increasing use of double page spreads as we know them now really started in the Arlong Arc too. But
interesting note. Yeah. And also Johnny and Yokozu go on their own way, which I still feel like I was the only one who really loved those characters.
You love them so much, you'll get their names right eventually.
No, I won't. I can't pronounce things. We know that.
Yes,
why don't we
Yokazu? Sorry.
Don't judge me, Ed. Why don't we talk about the info dump that is right after Arlong and in through Loguetown, which is all basically its own info
Navy
dump.
Headquarters.
We get to see Navy headquarters for the first time, and John Giant and
Vice Admiral John Giant.
He's a vice admiral?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, he is.
Commander,
Luffy's
brand
first
new
wanted poster.
Luffy's first wanted poster with Usopp in it, in the background there.
I should point out that
Shanks.
if you started reading the manga in Japanese, this was actually the first point where you actually realized that Luffy's name was spelled Luffy, because it doesn't appear written in English at any point before then. So this was when I was first reading it in Japanese, this is where I was like, oh, it's Buggy the Clown, not Boggy, and Luffy, it's not Roofy, it's Luffy with an L.
Oh, wow.
Wow. I didn't realize it was this late that you find that out. he's a lot bigger into the English, putting English in random places, or I should say English in random places.
I always wondered about one thing, like in that same chapter where Nami gets the news coup and she's haggling with the news coup, but that's beside the point. And Usopp gets Tabasco in his eyes, always a good gag. But there's a coup d'etat in Vera. Where the hell is Vera?
We don't find out, but I think it's important, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the
spoilers
in the Reverie segment. But I think it's important to the person who shows up. That's all I'll say. I think it's just kind of a hint that person's involvement might be what it is. Wow, I can't be more general than this was.
And they talk about the fact that the Navy is justice. But what is justice? That's a question for another day.
Thank you, Ed. So we head to Loguetown, or as VIZ calls it.
No. Yes, Roguetown.
Thank you, Ed. Loguetown, just for an explanation, is the beginning and the end. It's a log, epilogue, prologue.
Log pose.
Log pose. Wait, no, that's spelled... I thought that's spelled L-O-G. Is that also spelled L-O-G-U-E?
No, it's spelled L-O-G, but I think it has the same, base meaning.
Yeah.
This is an audio format anyway. We can get away with that kind of joke.
Yeah, it is too bad that VIZ, I think, they assumed, and I can't necessarily blame them, that Loguetown, that it was English basically, because that is the kind of mistake that you do see from time to time with anime and manga. But that was a little bit unfortunate, because it definitely is there for a reason. It was Loguetown.
Mm-hmm. And do you guys want to talk about it? Because this is one of my favorite arcs, definitely.
You want to talk about Shanks and Mihawk? We get our little first decks of the world.
Oh, yeah, no,
right.
that's true.
When Luffy gets his poster.
Mm-hmm. So we see that Whoopslap is not happy, and Mayor Whoopslap is not happy that a famous pirate has come from his town. And everyone else
is never happy about anything. Yeah. I don't mean to spoil things, but...
Yeah, Shanks is happy.
But he actually mentioned something really relevant. The mayor does when Nojiko says, he's following his dream. And then Mayor Whoopsap says, his dream or his destiny?
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that line. That's like a little optimistic.
That's Makino, right?
Makino, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, we get to see Shanks, albeit in silhouette, and his crew, albeit in shadow. And we get to kind of see that relationship between Mihawk and Shanks, which I think was expounded upon a little bit more in the anime. I mean, we get in that last panel where they're like, hey, you want some grog? I'm sorry, there's still pirate language here.
No. Yeah.
But it's a really cool thing to see, because we don't see Shanks in the present day up until that point, if you think about it. This is the first time we're seeing that. Mm-hmm. And by present day, I mean at this point.
Zach, I have a question. And you have the digital. You've had the digital versions of these volumes.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
There's obviously a lot of color pages, like maybe one color page per chapter in a lot of these like earlier chapters.
They're not colored here. They're shaded.
Damn.
Yeah, I know. That would be a great incentive. You should tell someone, Steven, over there. But I'm sure they exist, and I'm sure they have them.
Shueisha's just saving them for their deluxe edition 20 years in the future.
Yeah, I think that's...
The Kanzenban.
Yeah.
I think they did put them in the log collections, which were like giant Jump, the Jump magazine size things. Yeah. But I don't know if they even still do those.
Those are printed on semi-shitty paper, though.
Yeah.
I think they stopped doing that pretty recent, like Marineford-ish. All right, so why don't we talk about Loguetown, because I'm scratching at the bit to talk about it. What did you guys... What? Mixing metaphor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do that. I do that, and I mispronounce things. What did you guys think of this arc when you first read through it? What did you pick up? What did you notice?
I was surprised how important this arc was to the rest of the series. Like the introduction of Smoker, Captain Smoker, and then Buggy and Alvida's return, which I did not see coming, because this is the first time in the series we have the cover stories playing back into the main story. Mm-hmm. And we discover like what happened to Alvida, and like we discovered who this mysterious woman was. It was Alvida. She lost all that weight, but you can't tell. All she did was lose freckles after she ate a devil fruit. and when the weather turns bad, someone else shows up who's very important to the series, which we find out later. And it also introduces my future fiance Tashigi.
Congratulations, by
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah, thank you.
I do love the way that they did the Alvida point, because it's a bit of dramatic irony, because if you've been reading and you saw the cover page story, it's Alvida, but no one else in the story knows it. None of the Straw Hats know that it's Alvida, and even Luffy doesn't know it's Alvida, which is a great kind of little foreshadow thing.
Actually, it isn't clear that it's Alvida. Like, she never says her name. Buggy doesn't know who she is.
Yeah, I didn't think they ever revealed that.
Really?
Yeah, you can pick it up through context. I didn't know until she actually said, "I'm Alvida." I was like, "Oh, that's you."
Yeah.
That one got me.
I have to go back and look at the actual cover story to see, but maybe it's just because I've known for so long that my mind just overrode it.
Yeah, that's what happened with me too.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we also, since we're speaking of cover stories, we have the stuff, the beginning, I think, of the Kobe Helmeppo one here as well, which I think we'll probably talk more about next time, because I think it finishes up next time.
Yeah, it's still going on at the end of volume 12.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to talk about like Zoro getting. Well, also, there's that incredible piece of art. There's a whole third of a page is taken up by Luffy and the scaffold, and it's like a blank white background on it.
Mm-hmm.
And even though there's all these people in the square, it doesn't matter to him. All that's there for him is the scaffold and him. It's but with Zoro getting his swords, I think
probably my favorite, definitely the highlight of this arc, or one of the highlights.
We get the explanation about the 40 high grade swords, the 21 excellent, and the 12 perfect grade swords.
Yeah.
And the way Tashigi talks about it and how unnerved Zoro is by her, and the fact that she is very clumsy, and which is also what led to his friend's death.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it.
I often wonder if Tashigi is just Kuina kidnapped by something or other, and because we don't.
I'm with you, Ed. I think maybe she hit her head and got amnesia.
I was gonna say that.
Falling down the stairs is a pretty weak story. Like, I don't know if anyone can really buy that. Like, she just got abducted or something.
Well, no, but they show her corpse.
No, they show her corpse in the anime, but not in the manga.
No, they showed it in the manga with the thing covering her head. I'm almost positive.
You didn't see the face.
Oh, you're right.
You didn't see the face.
Right.
Could have been a body double.
I'm sorry, Steven. I love the stuff with the Katetsu the Third, where he throws it in the air, and
sticks out his arm, and
then it just pierces through the floor when it doesn't hit him, and you're like, shit, that really would have cut his arm off.
Yeah. I wonder who wields the first and second generation Katetsu.
Well, they're both dead, so we don't have to worry about it.
That's how Ipponmatsu says. We don't
not necessarily
trust what Ipponmatsu says.
I have a theory on who wields the first Katetsu, but I have to save it for another podcast.
Whoa. Okay.
I've mentioned it on the normal One Piece podcast before, so if you go back,
I don't remember.
I could say it. Okay, I'll tell you guys after.
Okay.
The idea that the sword chooses the wielder. It's a powerful concept, and Ipponmatsu looks into Zoro's eyes, and he's seen Tashigi before. Tashigi comes to his job all the time, but when he looks Zoro in the eye, he says, "That's a real swordsman." Yet he hasn't seen one in a long time.
We also meet Smoker, as we've touched upon, who is a badass, but yet loving pants with ice cream eating abilities character. What did you guys think seeing him for the first time and seeing him again?
Oh, that's such a good introduction. I mean, again, Oda is managing. I looked back and there's not very many panels that Smoker's actually in, and yet you have this very visceral reaction to him, and you know who he is by the end of this arc.
And I think it was very important to introduce him at this point to show that not all Navy officers are either corrupt or incompetent, like Pudding or Nezumi or Full Body.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. They do a very, very good job with that. He is kind, he is ruthless, he is efficient, and he's great at his job.
He reminds us that the pirates are the bad guys usually.
Yeah, which is easy. I think Luffy makes a joke later in the show. It's like, oh yeah, we're the bad guys. I forgot about that.
I mean, also with Alvida and Buggy around, they're still the pirates being terrible people.
And then we get the mysterious thunderstorm and
Ooh.
the execution and the mysterious character that we can't talk about. What
We discuss like Luffy laughing in the face of death a lot during the Reverie segment, so I don't know if they'll hear that when we go on to the next segment too.
Yeah, but God, these are some of my favorite moments. The one that starts off volume 12 and the chapter 100 and chapter 99. And just seeing this mysterious character who is clearly, I'd say, on the level of Mihawk, you know, someone who's very strong, someone who's clearly influential and important to the series, but who the hell is he?
We also talk about how funny Luffy is on the execution platform.
Go ahead.
With like he's like, oh, you have to, like, he's like begging for, like, doing the half-hearted begging for forgiveness, and he starts like sulking, but then right at the end he's like, sorry guys, I died, and then laughing, and it's such it's an emotional roller coaster where he's making light of it, so you don't really think how serious it is, and it gets very serious very quickly, and when Luffy acts the way he acts, it's so unusual.
Yeah, no one would. Very few people laugh in the face of getting executed. And who would have thought the series ended there? But it's over. But in general, these are some really cool things, and I want to talk about the difference with the anime, because the anime does something interesting, and it takes ideas Oda had and just didn't have time to go through since he was trying to get to that 100 chapter mark to get to the Grand Line. So we have Daddy the Father. I don't know if you guys remember that episode. We got a little more with the elephant fish, which does show up here, but isn't there like a whole contest or something with that?
Yeah, there's a cooking contest with guys with weird faces.
Probably one of my favorite parts is also going to that bar with that guy talking about Roger. It was also a really cool additional.
You also get a flashback of Smoker as a child witnessing Roger's execution.
Yes,
that's a ballsy move. It might be. He kind of implies it, I think, in a part. He says something about talking about Roger's execution and seeing it or something.
Well, he knew that Roger also smiled during the execution. So either he was there or he heard about it later.
Yeah.
Oh wow! I just noticed something. Daddy the Father is voiced by Toru Furuya, who just came back and voiced a very important character recently.
Right. That was talked about. And Daddy the Father is someone who Oda drew and planned on using, but didn't have time to use. Yeah. So I think those are all really cool facts.
I actually didn't realize.
It explained how Usopp got. Sorry.
No, I didn't either, Miles.
It didn't feel like it when I was watching it, and then I was reading it here, and I didn't even realize it was missing from the manga until you just brought it up. It felt so in line with what Oda was doing at that point.
Yeah,
what the anime did, which was smart, is that they tied it into things that would actually come into play, like the elephant, fish tuna, and Usopp's sniper goggles. So that's why it feels like it flows in naturally. But like I read all the manga first, so I instantly was like, wait, I don't remember this character.
Yeah, the sniper goggles were mentioned in SBS much later on, I think. I'm way ahead. I'm sorry, not way ahead. I'm a few volumes ahead. But they do mention that, so they're taking very good ideas that Oda has already put forth and expanding on them, and that is good filler. So I guess that's it for Loguetown. We actually get all of Laboon in volume 12, which is a fun little arc, and I forget just how crazy it is. I mean, we get a little bit about the Calm Belt. I probably should mention. Ed, if you want to.
It's a mystery mountain, Zach.
Of course, the Mystery Mountain. How could I forget?
But I just wanted to go back and say that Smoker yells at Tashigi a lot more than I remembered.
Yeah, he's kind of an ass.
A little bit.
with her.
And there's also, the whole bit like at the beginning of chapter 100 with like Zoro versus feminism, where he's discussing like his problems with Tashigi. And like she wants to be treated equally. She wishes she was a man, and they have the whole thing about like, you talk exactly like this girl I used to know. And
I don't think it's feminism. I think it's just
no. That's just what I wrote, and I thought it was funny in my notes.
Good for your notes. No, I think it's just she's reminding him so much of her. Yeah. And I think Zoro finds just that line of reasoning ridiculous. I think it's kind of obvious. And
they're actually one of my favorite kind of couples, quote unquote, in One Piece, because Zoro's acting like an immature boy. Yeah. Where he's like, he can't admit that he likes her, or that he has like any sort of like even like feelings of friendship or affection towards like, hey, you look like my lost friend. That makes me feel. he has to instead like stop looking like my friend.
Yeah.
You copycat captain or copycat marine.
Yeah.
He's just like they're both children in
There's
a
also
sense.
there's also the little goof up, I think, with I don't know if they explain what sea stone is, or maybe that's not explained yet. But with Buggy and Alvita, they're trapped in a prison bullet
Yeah, I think that was
developed by the
at
Navy
the time. Yeah.
for use against devil fruit people. Maybe Buggy didn't
No,
understand.
I think they say maybe it's in my corrected version. I think they say sea stone in this, but it's going to take me a minute or two to confirm that.
It's right at the beginning. It's like the first pages of chapter.
He says, "Yeah, prison bullet." You're right.
Okay. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be explained yet. Sorry.
No, I prison bullet. It probably meant sea stone. Is maybe Oda didn't realize at the time, or VIZ didn't realize at the time.
Yeah.
But it controls devil fruit users, so there's a way to do that, and that's important.
Yeah, and it's called sea stone in the future, just so you guys know.
Yeah.
Or I see prism stone, I think is
Right.
the other term for it. But yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about we finally get to the Grand Line. We get that nice scene where everyone announces what they're going to be, what they're going to do. I love that scene with the barrel of beer or whatever is in there.
You know, when we were watching that test stub episode back in Dallas,
Yeah.
that was like, that might have been the first time I actually saw that calm belt scene in the anime.
Yeah, because they throw that in a bunch of filler, unfortunately. And there's some very important stuff there because Nami goes through this whole expositional monologue, about how everything works and the calm belt works and the Grand Line works. And it's
And you have to read it twice. You really do. It doesn't actually make very much logical sense the way that the, reverse mountain and all that works. But it ends up being, so important to the series. And I think it's really cool.
It makes perfect sense if you listen to my crackpot theory in the Reverie segment.
That is a crackpot theory. You're really hinting at a lot of what we're about to do. But the whole scene getting up the reverse mountain's great, and then what they find the second they get down is probably not what any of us expected when we first read this. The biggest whale any human being has ever seen by far. I love that 2-page spread there, just showing how enormous this whale is.
Yeah, I remember last week, I think it was you, Ed, who was comparing a lot of early One Piece to Disney. And
I don't
when
think
I
that was
first
me.
saw...
Might have been Steve.
That wasn't you?
I think it was.
Okay, yeah.
I think it was Steve, yeah.
Okay, that was Steve. So it's funny how I see Laboon and instantly I thought like Monstro the Whale from Pinocchio.
Yeah. He's very Disney-ish, but Laboon's a great character, and I never expected the first thing to happen is that they get eaten by a giant whale once Luffy punches him in the eye.
Yep, definitely a hallucination. Definitely a hallucination.
And it's great because the entire crew, except for Luffy, ends up inside his stomach, which happens to be adorned by everything Crocus did there. Sky, an island made of. Yeah.
This is a whale with a scaffold and a secret exit.
And one of the best gags ever, especially in the anime with Crocus.
Don't point that cannon. Someone's gonna get killed. Oh yeah? It's like me. That's another one of my favorite gags.
So good.
And Luffy,
weird.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Timing is critical, and even though like the manga did an okay job like expressing like the crew's frustration with this weird old man, but the timing in the anime and just like the reuse of animation and with the music is just like one of the best things I've ever seen in any series.
I think it was the first time I really laughed out loud in One Piece. And not
Luffy,
like LOL, but actually laughing out loud.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the crew gets swallowed, but Luffy's on top of the whale. He's about to, he's gonna die. Basically, he's a devil fruit user, and there's a trap door in a whale. Come on.
And you find out Crocus is actually giving morphine, some sort of sedative. I don't know why I thought morphine is the first thing. A sedative to Laboon, who is trying to, and you get this whole great background on Laboon, a whale, as the first thing you see in the Grand Line, which I would have never expected, and how he's trying to find a crew that probably is dead at this point, or is long gone at least. And
It's something I just had a thought. Sorry, Zach.
Yeah, go.
You when you say like this, we never expected to see this in the Grand Line. Only through hindsight after reading One Piece for so long, do I think, of course, this is what you see in the Grand Line, because Oda perfectly accentuates the badassness and the like awesome seriousness of like the pirates' graveyard being the Grand Line with just something that's ridiculous every time he does it. He always sets you up for like, oh, this is going to be like dramatic and awesome and bigger than you've ever seen, and then like, okay, a giant whale.
Well, it is bigger than you've ever seen.
I mean, it's right after you see that big spread on the calm line of all the terrible sea monsters, and then you go from that to Laboon, and Laboon dwarfs every single one of them. So I think that's kind of neat, that it shows that maybe there's more danger, but there's more than meets the eye on the Grand Line too.
Very well said. And is there anything you guys want to talk about specifically with this little Laboon arc that besides just the very general overview I gave?
I found it really emotional, despite it's like a very short arc. Literally, I think it's not even eight chapters.
Yeah, it's like half the volume, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, but his backstory, the fact you got this tiny little whale that was basically a pet to these pirates who came to the Grand Line 50 years ago, and he is so distraught over being abandoned by them that he's ramming his head into the Red Line, which is this giant like continent wall, to break through in order for him to reach the other side to either get back home or to get back to these pirates somehow. It's just like, it breaks my heart every time. Much like how what's the dog from Buggy? Choo Choo?
Choo Choo.
Or Choo?
Choo Choo.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Choo Choo. Oda just learns how to like personify animal-like characters to give them very human kind of like emotions or dedications that I don't think very many other series do as well.
I think animals having an animal, you know that they could evoke emotions in you with just like even a look. I think Oda does a very good job. He's definitely an animal person, if you can't tell, by what we've seen so far.
Very true.
Probably one of the most important things to happen in this arc, though, is that we get a gigantic exposition dump on how the Grand Line works, which is important since this is our first time here.
Before that happens, we get Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine,
which we'll see a lot more. Yeah, next.
And they're trying to. They're whaling. They're whalers.
They're trying. No, we're whalers.
Whales on the sea.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think they're just trying to get the meat to bring back to the town that we're going to see to feed the town.
Right. But they get dumped overboard pretty unceremoniously once they escape from inside Laboon,
and then thrown back on board a little bit later.
And we get the unluckies, Mr.
13 and
Miss Friday. Yeah, the sea otter and the vulture, who are dropping bombs on failed agents. What?
Well, we'll find out next time. Yeah,
that's for next time. Yeah.
But just this last thing, I guess, until we wrap things up here, we find out the Red Line works. There are different magnetic fields. There's a log pose, and we find out the last island is Raftel, which is probably very important. Not probably, definitely. I think you could gather that by this point. This is kind of setting up things to come for a long time.
We can't really discuss this without spoiling, so that's the next segment.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? I'm going to stop there because Volume 12 goes into Whiskey Peak, which I'm sure you guys read, but I kind of want to talk...
So much fun.
Which is so much fun. But I want to talk about that more next time because the bulk of it is in Volume 13.
One more thing. Leaving Laboon. I talk about this in the next segment, but I can talk about this without being spoilery, and I really want to mention it more than once. Because I love Luffy's heart. Luffy has massive heart. He's empathetic with animals. He sees the pain that Laboon is in, the pain of separation, like the losing hope, like the sort of the hopelessness of his situation. He's going to ram his head into the thing until he dies. So Luffy gets up there and he sticks the mast of the ship. He breaks the mast of the ship.
Yeah, which Usopp, I love Usopp's reaction there. It's like, what's happening here?
Yeah, is that the mast of our ship? Anyway, he stuffs it into his head and he fights Laboon, and he declares it a draw. And we're going to have to complete this at a later time. I'm going to paint my flag on your face so you can't ram it into the Red Line anymore. And he's helped this whale, he's given the whale a new purpose. He's given him something new to hope for. And
I also didn't notice the giant bandages over where he stuck the mast, and where he later puts the terrible drawing of his Jolly Roger.
Terrible.
Yeah, but
Beautiful.
It just shows like how well Luffy really understands people, and like his emotional intelligence is so high. And this comes back all the time throughout the series, but Luffy really understands people.
Yeah,
and he really shows it here.
But think about how
animals.
much the Mary gets in this arc.
Yeah, like the second they get into the Grand Line.
It just all of a sudden destroyed the Luffy sitting spot is removed by Laboon, and Luffy removes the mask. Like, this ship's gone through a lot in just like 5 chapters.
Yeah, the ever-present
and
metal
what we'll
plating.
see is that damage, that damage maintains, which is also fun. That Oda keeps track of all those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a ship. It doesn't have magical Zenzubines or whatever. No, it's really cool to see. So, I guess final thoughts on the end of East Blue, Miles, if you have anything that you want to, any lingering thoughts.
So, I mean, I said that I was very resistant to get into One Piece originally when my friend was trying to force it upon me. It was kind of this last little bit that pushed me over the edge into, falling in love with all the characters. Like, the Arlong Arc was good, and that was the first, in my from that perspective, when I was so guarded about the series, the first good arc that I didn't have to, justify anything. And then Laboon was the first arc that actually really hit me on an emotional level. I think I might have even cried when I first watched it. So this is where One Piece takes off for me, and really glad to be here to talk about it since it's so important.
It's a good thing 4 kids skipped that, right? Sorry. Bryan?
Yeah, East Blue has a very special spot in my heart for being the first arc I had in One Piece, and I always think back on it as like it sets up so many things beautifully, and you still get a sense for what kind of adventure you're going on. And the entire time of the arc, it's always talking about the Grand Line's coming, and we're finally here, we're finally to the Grand Line. And I always say to people when I recommend One Piece for them, if you can get to the Arlong Arc and you're still not enjoying the series, it's just not for you. There's no way you can get through all of East Blue, the first 100 chapters, and still not like be interested or get it. That to go any further at that point is pointless, because it only gets better from then, and the whole thing is set up for how epic and large the series eventually becomes.
Very well said. Ed, any final thoughts from you?
It's East Blue is the place where we assemble the pieces that are One Piece. We talk about themes of Kuro and Buggy and Baratie and Arlong, and that all culminates in Loguetown. It's like where One Piece, the series, becomes this unified thing that it knows what it is by the end of East Blue and by the time we enter the Grand Line. And you realize that this was all just prologue. This is 10, 12 volumes of prologue before we get to the real thing.
It's a 75-volume series at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Or 77.
And it's One Piece is fully formed at this point in the story, and it's just it takes you it's ready. It's time for the real story to begin.
Yeah, it's like One Piece on a microcosm. I think that's a very accurate point. It's because you see this kind of structure again, a bunch of arcs that kind of might be intertwined, might not be intertwined, and then people coming back from the beginning again. It's that same kind of thing comes back on much bigger scales every time we see it again. So yeah, very well put. Why don't we get into the Reverie, and then if you don't want to listen to spoilers, you could skip to our final segment where we'll let you know what's happening next time. You guys ready?
Yes.
This is the Reverie, in which we have our experts come together and see how things look in retrospect. So this will be a little bit more spoilery than our regular segment. So if you haven't read most or all of One Piece up to this point, you may want to skip ahead to the ending. So first, with us, we have Ed. Hey, Ed.
Hello.
We have Steven. Hey, Steven.
That's me.
And we have Bryan Newton. Hey, Bryan.
Hola.
So why don't we start? We're going to go through each arc and kind of, in retrospect, we can talk about it generally or little things that pop out at you, what you think about it. Why don't we start with the Krieg stuff? Is there anything... I mean, we talked about Mihawk, and obviously there's a lot of stuff about Mihawk that plays in later, but that was last week.
2 weeks ago.
I'm sorry, that was 2 weeks ago. So what did you guys think of everything else? So, I mean... There's a lot of stuff. What do you hope to see? What do you think looks crazy in retrospect? Ed, do you want to start? Are you ready to start?
Sure. I think Oda is being, I don't want to say heavy-handed, but he made his theme of the Krieg fight clear in talking about free will. And well, that also has to do with Sanji, but I think the Krieg element was sort of the fact that pirates can't rely on, outside things. The outside, the accoutrements are sort of a mask for people who are weak on the inside. And so he's been foreshadowing that a lot, that the thing that you need to believe in is yourself. And it's a common theme throughout pretty much the rest of the series, but you're sort of defining here in East Blue what pirates are and aren't, and what real pirates are and aren't. And
that's definitely true.
Yeah, and I was just sort of struck by how forcefully he made that point, and it really sticks out, and I think it was really effective.
Steven.
And I think that's something that he sort of got that out of the way in these arcs. Like, you don't really see that, I think, that particular struggle or, the themes of the arcs being framed in that way as much later on. Like, it's kind of like, I don't know if it's just that Oda kind of figures, okay, I think you have an idea of what it is that the Straw Hats are doing, and the other things is not so much pirate versus pirate sometimes as it is like over the backdrop of like the fate of a country sort of things,
right? That's like with Crocodile. But the thing I think about the Grand Line is that all the pirates who make it to the Grand Line and are successful there are true pirates. They have to have a certain level of skill and power to be able to move basically in the Grand Line. So I think it's also important to establish about Luffy's never-ending belief in himself, I think, is also...
and that really shines through, I think, very well in the Don Krieg stuff. It's like, look, I'll put my fist through spikes, I don't give a shit, I'm going to take you down. And that's something I think that definitely resonates a lot. I think it establishes that part of his character very well, this arc, because he's up against a guy who believes, for some reason, that he's invincible, and he has an army of however many people.
Right.
But it doesn't make a difference against Luffy's. What did they call it? Not gumption. It was I forgot what Zeph called it.
Grit.
Grit. Yeah.
Grit.
Brian, true grit is what I kept thinking when I was reading this. I'm like, where's the... Anyway, Brian.
Ed brought up something. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Ed mentioned something interesting when he was saying that how it's true pirates who make it to the Grand Line, and it's interesting because Krieg, I always saw Don Krieg as like the ultimate in like the idea of piracy, as in he is underhanded, he is tricky and manipulative, and he does it only to win and to conquer and I guess to plunder. And like the fact that we're dealing with this guy who is self-proclaimed king of the East Blue, or Don of the East Blue, and he's supposedly the most powerful pirate in those seas, who has like I think he had like 5,000 men and like 50 warships. And Luffy, at this point in his adventure, only had like a crew of 2-3 people.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I want to also ask you guys what you think. I think there are two characters here, either in their past or in their future, that are going to be important in this arc, and that's Gin and Zeph. I mean, I was wondering where you think those two fit into the story, either to come or in the past, because we learn a lot about like all the older characters, like Crocus, who we'll talk about a little bit later, and how they fit into the story. I was wondering what you guys thought about Zeph and then Gin, because we know we're going to see him at some point. We just don't know when.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're not expecting Zeph to do anything because he's achieved his dream.
Yeah, he's all done.
Right. Do you think he was like the cook on some sort of famous pirate ship? Because a lot of people have said that.
Well,
yeah,
maybe.
he fits into the kind of the archetype that we see time and time again of like, oh, here's someone who is kind of, you might as well say they're a retiree from the piracy business, and it seems like most of them, it turns out, oh, they knew Roger in some way, or so I've seen a lot of people who were like, oh, maybe he was like the cook on Roger's ship.
The cook on Roger's ship has already been mentioned in the Buggy's flashback. Like that was one of the things she used to threaten Buggy. Is like, hey, don't steal food, or else the cook's going to be mad.
Yeah, but he's never hinted at that the way that he has, or he's made explicit with others, like with Crocus or
Crocus. He basically says it.
Yeah,
and he does later say it.
Mm-hmm. And then
Crocus just says I was a pirate ship doctor for a time.
Yeah, but then he also mentions.
But then he says, that.
Roger,
Yeah.
Oh, how are you doing, Roger? Oh, wait, you're dead.
and Dr. Kureha as well, although I don't know necessarily that she was related, but you just get this picture of like, oh, all these old hands, like these old veterans, like they all kind of knew him. And I think Zeph, even though we don't know that he fits into that mold of character, I think.
Well, I think that kind of fits. I mean, there's obviously a lot of parallels between Luffy and Roger that we see early on and later on. I think Loguetown shows some great early parallels with that, which again we'll get to a little later. But I think having Roger touch all those people in some way is a lot like Luffy, who's not just going by the same people and impacting the same people, but everywhere he goes, he impacts everyone around him in some way. So I think it's cool to think, oh, there was a story where Roger kind of did the same thing. We don't have to tell it, but it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about some characters who were first mentioned in the Baratie Arc?
That would be great. Yeah, Ed, go ahead.
One word, Jinbei. Fishman Island.
We should probably talk about the very end. There's like just that one chapter where you get like an info dump that you don't realize is such a crazy info dump until
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention it.
Well, no, that whole thing is like in retrospect. I think there's like just that whole speech that Yasuku made.
I think it was.
Yeah. Talking about Fishman Island here. I'm trying to pull it up in front of me as well. Talking about.
Well, he also mentions the government for the first time. I recall the government and then the warlords.
Yeah, and he for some reason Yasuku sets the stage for everything to come here. We get the introduction of the 7 warlords. We get the introduction of not just Jinbei and the Fishman pirates, but kind of how that whole thing went down in a way and how Arlong separated from them, which is easy to forget about.
Right, since Jinbei... Yeah. Well, we should explain that since Jinbei became a warlord, they disbanded his pirate crew.
Right.
Yeah, and as Yosaku put it, they dispatched Arlong to the East Blue, although we know that's not really the case now.
Actually, I think that's kind of a misinterpretation of all that we've learned prior since. I remember like when these early chapters are happening that people thought, because when we first are introduced to Mihawk, he's solitary. And when we see Crocodile, he has a secret organization. So everyone seemed to think that in order to become a warlord, you have to disband with your crew. But I think the deal Jinbei struck was that we found out the deal he struck with the government, but that had nothing to do with like him not being a pirate captain anymore. That was just like, I'll become a warlord if you release this dude. And that's how Arlong ended up in the East Blue.
No, it's
I don't think.
Go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, I don't think in order to become a warlord, you can no longer have a pirate crew. Because that would also be the same for... It
would defeat the purpose, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, they need a crew to, like, maintain their position.
Yeah. I mean, as we learned, Flamingo has a very large crew, and...
Kuma doesn't. Hancock does.
Moria does. Blackbeard definitely did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think most of them do. Mihawk is just clearly always solitary. I don't know what the deal with him is. Yeah. I mean, he lives on that island alone.
Of all the warlords, we really know the least about his history.
We know very little about him, which is weird since it's the first one we saw. He spent a lot of time with Zoro.
Yeah. And we know somewhat about Kuma and Doflamingo and Hancock, and a little less about Crocodile, actually. We know a lot more about his present than we know about his past. His past has a lot of questions.
Yeah, that's true. We know a lot about his dreams and his motivations. I think we know a lot about Crocodile.
We know lots about
Buggy. We know a lot about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't we talk about Arlong? And I'm sure we could talk about this for a while, but just seeing things in retrospect, I mean, obviously this is a kind of pivotal moment for everyone reading One Piece, but kind of in retrospect, how did this arc strike you rereading it?
Still holds up, I think. It's still really good.
Yeah.
I was really enjoying myself up until Arlong, and I don't mean to sound like I wasn't enjoying myself after I read it, but I was really sort of emotionally struck by it. And even though my opinions of Baratie and Kuro in particular increased, I found that they still did not meet my passion for the Arlong arc, the Arlong material. And also, I think the art took a real step up during the Arlong arc too.
Yeah, it looks way better. I'm sure we already talked about that.
There used to be a lot more color pages.
I've been mentioning that.
But I is there anything in retrospect, for me, it was definitely a lot quicker than I remember. I think that's kind of part of that 100 chapter thing that Oda was clearly striving for here. But I think I forgot how this is really the start of a trope that I really hate, that I'm sure we've also mentioned, and that's getting stuck somewhere for Luffy.
Yeah.
And I forget how long that happened. And it's clearly something Oda started here. It's like, oh, everyone loved the Arlong arc. This is the part they loved about it.
Do you want to go? You want to go through a few of the ones that
chapters?
Do you want to run off some of the other places he's gotten stuck?
We actually just put an editorial out about it if people are curious about reading it. I think Kyle put it out. It's like, oh, this was written for me, because I'm the only one who consistently complains about it. What was it called? Something, I don't remember. I'll find that article at some point. But it's interesting how that started here.
Like and the number of ways that Luffy is incapacitated, essentially.
Yeah.
So what do we have? We have
Down a Garbage Chute.
It's called In the Belly of the Beast and Other Sticky Situations. Not in Thriller Bark. Oh, in Punk Hazard, he gets stuck down a garbage chute. In Punk Hazard, he also gets stuck in a cage. In Skypiea, he gets swallowed by a snake.
Yeah, he also gets a giant ball of gold stuck on his arm.
Mm-hmm. Water 7 was terrible with the building. That was just like, screw you guys at that point.
Yeah.
The building. There was I don't know if it counts as much as being stuck, but in Alabasta he got basically defeated in the desert and left for dead. And then
that I thought was more legitimate. I mean, he did get defeated.
Right. Yeah.
What about the cage they all fell into in Alabasta when they were trapped by the banana duck?
That was that had some great banter, which I'm sure we'll talk about. That's some of my favorite banter.
Also stuck in a cage in the buggy arc.
Yeah, that did annoy me. I forgot to mention that last week or 2 weeks ago, the last episode. You guys get it. It was frustrating.
So we start to get a picture, and we get the chart in the SBS, but we start to learn a lot more about the Marines. We have we had Full Body, but he was just one guy. But now we have Nezumi, Pudding, and the rest. And
you see, I mentioned this on Twitter when I was going through it. How the hell is Purin, or however the hell I'm supposed to correctly pronounce his name? How is he a Commodore? It's like, what is Smoker doing wrong?
He's in East Blue. I don't know how. East Blue is a weak C. We know that.
And what was Nezumi was here? I'm on the page.
He's Taisa. He was captain.
Yeah, he's a captain.
Yeah.
Jeez, poor Smoker.
Captain Nezumi.
Again, an East Blue captain. I think it has to do with branch and headquarters as well.
I think the other thing is Smoker just wasn't trying that hard to move up the ranks. That wasn't when I say trying that hard to move up the ranks. I mean, he's not looking to impress.
The Navy is like any other institution. Like, not everyone climbs the ranks because they're a badass. Some people are just politically connected or just conniving enough that they are just going to gain authority. Yes,
that's the interesting thing about Smoker. Since obviously we do see him here in this stretch of books, is he's very clearly he's one of those guys who is not interested in like playing the game. He's not a ladder climber type of guy, but his skill is such that it's going to happen one way or another because he's such a valuable asset. But there's a part where he has a line where like someone says, they're telling him what to do, or they're worried about what
Don't leave Loguetown. Don't leave Loguetown.
And they're like, but what are the superiors going to say? And he says, wait, here it is. Yeah. The Grand Line is outside your jurisdiction. What will our superiors say? And Smoker says, you don't tell me what to do. Go tell them that. Like, I'm pretty sure that's the entire point of a superior officer, is to tell you what to do.
Any competent military, he would have been thrown out years ago.
Yeah. So.
No, well, I mean, the thing is, he's very good at his job. Yeah. Since we're talking about Loguetown, totally. we might as well talk about Smoker in Loguetown.
Well, remember, like, when we meet Black Tina, she says almost the exact same thing. It's like, we graduate at the same time. You should be in a much higher position by now.
He's a loose cannon.
I mean, he wasn't thrown out, but he's essentially punished by not moving up.
You blew up 4 city blocks, McGarnagle. These blocks were already messed up. Wait, that's right. Never mind.
But Smoker, I mean, for me, getting into One Piece, Smoker, I mean, I'm sure I've already talked about this also, but Smoker was the kind of the thing that brought that about. Like, really got me into the show. And he's established so well, so early on, him and Tashigi. And it's really interesting to see kind of how established of a character, how quickly Oda just lets you live in his skin in a way. You see the part with the ice cream, the part you just mentioned, just his ruthlessness when it comes to, look, I got to do my job, I'm going to do it well, and he does do it very well. If it wasn't
first Logia user too,
he is, and I mean, he unfortunately gets a little bit foiled by the highest bountied individual in all of One Piece, as far as we know. It says explicitly. I mean,
that's right. I just wanted to go back to Arlong for a second. I was surprised to realize that the March on Arlong Park was pretty much invented for the anime.
Yeah.
That does not really exist in the manga, and I was really surprised by that. But it's really a scene; it's a silent scene, so it's kind of hard to depict in manga. And the music is really, I think, it was designed to sort of enhance or accentuate the music in that scene. But that's not really a spoilery thing.
It's kind of a the good guys show up in town at high noon to confront the bad guys type Western scene. Like they're all marching in a line towards their objective, which is the bad guys in town.
Mm-hmm.
And just to put it in go ahead.
As far as comparing it to that scene to the anime, there's certain things the anime accentuate, which is that march, but there's also certain things that the anime sometimes loses. And I remember this because I read the manga first before I saw the anime. And the shot where Luffy is asking which one of you is Arlong, and then he just walks over and like punches him in the face, cold cocks him. And the anime was so good the manga is so good at conveying that, because there's literally like Luffy walking Arlong and saying which one's Arlong, and the very next panel is just a giant like Luffy punching Arlong and his face twisting. And like the speed of which you go from one page to another page, that hit just seems like way more dramatic, where in the anime, if I recall, there's a long pullback where Luffy's pulling back his fist and like holds it and then like hits Arlong. I was like, wait, how he couldn't see that coming? He literally walked right next to him, drew back, and then like, I'm gonna hit you now.
The SBS kind of establishes some really cool things. I mean, we talked a little bit about the Navy rankings. He established that Kong would exist, essentially, that there's a commander-in-chief, which I found very interesting. Because I think everyone forgot about that. I think that's fair to say.
I certainly did, yeah.
I guess maybe people just thought it was the 5 Elder Stars. I think maybe people also sort of didn't really think about that hard.
Yeah.
Right. It's not explained with any detail in that it's just a list. It's like, oh, well, we've never seen this guy, or this rank or whatever. So,
but it's really cool how he brings it back. Let's say 40 volumes later, or whatever it was, much later. So yeah, why don't we talk a little bit more about the characters of Loguetown, because a lot happens. I mean, not only do we get these are basically establishing all the people who are following Luffy through the rest of this journey through the Grand Line. This is also the first time we see Dragon, and it's done in as epic a way as possible. I mean, you talked about at how long episode 100, chapter 100 is, and
It's 26 pages.
It just opens with Dragon's face, and reading this, knowing who Dragon is, the fact that Dragon is Luffy's dad, the fact that Dragon almost definitely, I think I'm positive after having read this again, he has to have wind powers or thunder power, some sort of weather powers. It was just really cool to read. I don't know, what did you guys think about that?
He's a character that inspires awe. Like, you don't understand what to make of him, and he's clearly... I mean, Smoker has been wrecking fools all throughout Loguetown, and he's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And Dragon's just like, whoosh, away with you. You get a sense like
nothing. Yeah.
It's the size of the series. You're like, well, this guy will obviously come back soon and be an important player. Nope.
Dragon's by far the most mysterious character in all of One Piece, even then, and continues to be like well into like nearly 800 chapters now.
Yeah, we have no idea anything about him, really.
And he says that the world is waiting for our answer, but exactly what's the question?
The question is, who is going to save us?
I guess, yeah.
I mean, I think...
we know.
Bryan, go ahead.
Sorry, we know now that like Dragon is the head of the revolutionaries, which was the big reveal we get later. So like he's like counter to the established natural order of this world, and we don't know why he's engaged in this or what he plans to achieve from that.
Yeah, I found just rereading this, the Loguetown part in particular, and this is something that I'm sure we'll bring up time and time again, but this is really the first case of kind of one of Oda's classic, like, I don't know what you would call this, like his mid-saga, like, it's kind of like half an info dump and half of like a pull back the camera sort of tricks where, you're in between these big, contained story arcs, and he shovels in a ton of stuff about the world that kind of changes the way that you look at it and gives you a better perspective of how things work and what the bigger picture is before sending you back into another adventure. Because in this case you've got Loguetown, you get this kind of like, this is a place that has a lot to do with Roger. It's kind of tying back into the background of the series. You get Smoker and Tashigi, who are these kind of embodiments of a certain type of kind of moral justice within the Marines, and you have Buggy and Alvida coming back, which you did not assume that Oda was going to do this sort of thing. This is kind of like one of those first hints where it's like, oh yeah, he's totally going to keep bringing back these characters. And then like Dragon is basically just like the cherry on the top, where it's just like, your mind is already reeling from all of these new developments, and this guy is clearly like the most mysterious and kind of foreboding of all of them. And it's the same sort of thing that we'll see, like in the post Alabasta stuff before Skypiea, and the stuff after Enies Lobby, before Thriller Bark, and all these. It's one of those classic, like just really incredibly rich slices of the story.
That's definitely why it's one of my favorite arcs, Loguetown. And
want to talk about the other D, the other important D at Loguetown? Goldie Roger, Zach.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at the fact that Luffy is the kind of guy who laughs in the face of death, and even with what we know about Roger now, like his real name, his children, what he like, the fact that he knew that he was dying before he went on his final voyage, and we still don't really understand it, like the laughing in the face of death. It's like, I was curious what you guys like thought about it, what sort of the parallels could be with Luffy and Roger, knowing what we know now.
Bryan?
I always thought that Roger and Luffy had like a really deep connection. Now we understand the connection, but like Luffy's sense of awe when he went to the execution place of Roger, and Luffy's whole drive to become the Pirate King, I always figured like Luffy was directly related to Roger in some way, and that this is like a way of him fulfilling it. But obviously the time of Luffy's birth with Roger's execution didn't quite make sense, but now we know that who the real link in that chain is.
Maybe it has something to do with what he saw with the One Piece, with Raftel, and the fact that, and I'm just realizing this now, but I've been thinking about this parallel between Luffy and Roger for a long time, and the fact that I didn't even realize this, the fact that I keep predicting that Luffy will die at the end of the series, die towards the end of the series, I think I've been drawing a direct parallel with Roger, and it was something I hadn't really thought about until reading this and thinking about it just now.
I mean, Luffy has that parallel. I mean, as we mentioned earlier, with the hat and everything. You know, I agree, and I think the thing is, the difference will be, I don't think Luffy's going to die like Roger. I don't think he's going to be executed, because I think part of what Luffy's out accidentally doing, I'll say, is that I don't think the world's going to look anything like it does. It already doesn't, but even more so, and anything like it does at the end of the series. I don't think the world government will exist as it does, at least.
You ever wonder if the world as we know it, with the calm belts and the Grand Line and all the land like it is a direct result of what the world government did at the end of during the Void Century?
Definitely.
They remade this world in their image, and they put the dangerous thing, because to be frank, the Lost Kingdom from Ohara looks a lot like Raftel from Chapter 100. You know,
I'm almost certain that's what this world is.
I agree.
It's like something almost orchestrated by the government. And even if they didn't create the incident themselves, they definitely exploited it to their advantage.
and what does this have to do with the giant astrological model in the library at Ohara, which Sai's been posting about on Twitter lately, and it's made me very interested.
No, the astronomical parts of One Piece just strike me as very interesting. I think it's established pretty early on in One Piece that those ancient kingdoms, the original one and what becomes the world government, were probably way more advanced than we could imagine. So something,
and the aliens,
and there are aliens, and there's I hope we go to space one day. I really
or
do.
At least have the space pirates come down.
Either way, with Eneru on some sort of arc.
Eneru and the Spaceys.
Yeah. But I am so interested in the world, and in these 6 chapters, we really learn a lot about how the world is constructed, with the calm belts and the Grand Line and the reverse mountain, and they're all really weird. And I think we see, it looks like it's almost constructed. It's like a canal, the reverse mountain. You have like the little gates over it. Mm-hmm. So that makes me, there's a lot of like ancient mythological kind of looking ruins around all of these things. And it would not surprise me if Ed, I think that was very astute of you. I think it's very likely all somewhat orchestrated, which makes me interested. How the hell do you sculpt a world like that in your image?
Zach, you gotta remember, Shirahoshi is an ancient weapon. Part of the power of the ancient weapon is to control the Neptunians, the Sea Kings. And maybe that's how we get the Calm Belt.
Brian, what?
Oh, don't forget about Pluton, which can destroy islands, supposedly. Also it's a ship.
Yeah. What's the other one? It's Uranus, Pluton, and
Poseidon.
Neptune.
Poseidon.
Yeah. Neptune would only make too much sense. Do we know what Poseidon does? Poseidon is
no. Poseidon is Shirahoshi's weapon.
Yeah.
So who's
and Pluton
Uranus?
is a giant weapon. Uranus is in space.
We don't know what Uranus is.
Oh, that's the one. That's the one.
It has to be in space.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Why
go to space with Eneru's cover story if you're not going back to space? Yeah,
it could be Sky as well.
It could be Sky, yeah. That's interesting. That's very interesting. But why don't we talk a little bit more about Laboon? I mean, we talked about Crocus a lot already, and I rewatched a little bit of the what is it? The stuff
Season 6, Voyage 4.
No, season like the beginning of season 7 stuff, and reread the beginning of season 7 stuff. And it's really interesting seeing the relationship between Crocus and with Rayleigh and Crocus, and talking about Crocus and being on Roger's ship. I mean, it's very strongly hinted, and I didn't really realize. I don't think any of us realized how strongly hinted it is, but it's kind of there as clear as day once you know. It's one of those things. But what did you guys think of this arc in retrospect? If there's anything else that stuck out at you.
This arc is a lot of Luffy being Luffy. You know, Luffy has that sort of empathetic. I mean, the whale can understand human speech, but he sort of feels it on an empathetic level. That he's waiting for these pirates that Luffy knows are never going to come back, and Laboon is just unwilling to accept it. So he comes up with a creative way of making him not hurt himself. And the good that he does now pays off in spades later on, because the fact that he knows this whale and has done good things for him is the reason he has a musician on his crew now.
He also stabbed him in the eye, though.
Punched him in the eye and stabbed him in the face.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just read that.
Tomato.
Yeah. I think what's the main guy's name from Brooks Pirates?
Calico
Yorkie.
Yeah, I mean, we see him. I'm almost positive
that is clearly him. It's his hat.
Yeah, in the 2-year cover story later, I think that's clearly him talking to Crocus now, because they do leave it very ambiguous whether he died. And seeing that story, I guess that really doesn't have to do with this that much, but seeing that story begin here, and then thinking about how Oda really wraps it up and brings it together in Thriller Bark, I never in a million years would have guessed that. That is such a cool thing to think about. Steven, any thoughts on this?
I mean, I don't know. You summed it up pretty well.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
Then we get Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday, and that's a whole topic for next week.
Yeah. So I think, Bryan, do you have any final thoughts?
The Corcus joke inside the whale is by far the best joke in the series.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it works so much better in the anime.
It really does.
Yes, I agree.
That is one of those moments that are way better in the anime.
I think we need to start having a segment just to talk about comedy and gags, because it doesn't really fall in with our plot discussion. And I feel like I need to write down all the gags that happen and just make a list of my favorite ones from all the volumes that we read.
Maybe for one of the weeks where we have a little less to talk about, we could talk about gags. Because there's going to be weeks where we only have 3 or 4 volumes to go through, so we could do it then. I think that concludes our Reverie segment. Thank you all for coming on to talk about, how things look in this perspective, in a future perspective. Thank you, guys.
Aliens did the Void Century. Don't believe sheeple.
This has been the second episode of the Great One Piece Read-Through. Huge thanks to Steven, who had to leave in the middle of the read-through, the read-through, whatever we're going to call it.
The read line?
The red line. What am I doing? The red line. I ruined the pun by completely saying the wrong thing. I do want to mention that if you want to see these episodes, and actually everything through Baroque Works now, on Crunchyroll, it's available in HD now. 1 through 61 is East Blue, and if you want to get ready for the next 2 volumes of this read-through, it's 62 through 135, or also the special edition is available in HD there. Good timing there. I'm going to completely credit you, Miles, if you're okay with that.
I had nothing involved to do with it, but I'm very happy we have it.
Next week, we're going to be covering volumes 13 through 17, so that's going to cover Whiskey Peak. That's going to also cover Little Garden and Drum Island, and we'll pick up the next week with the entire Alabasta arc. So that's going to be volume 18 through 23. And some of my favorite stuff in One Piece is in here, so I'm really excited to get this thing started. Before we round off today, Miles, how can people find you? What do you have going on over at Crunchyroll?
So you can find me at most major conventions in North America, but the easiest way to reach me in a hurry is on Twitter. You can find me at MilesExpress39. That's MilesExpress999, all one word.
Cool. Bryan, where can people find you?
I'm still directing on Teen Titans Season 3. And Season 2 of Rick and Morty is scheduled to air, I believe, July 26th, which is probably a Monday. And you can find me on Twitter at Dark King Zoro, all one word, or Banendorf on DeviantArt. And that's all I have to plug, and that's all I got to say.
I think it was a Sunday, actually, not a Monday. I'm not sure, though.
Oh, well, I suck.
Before we go through how to contact... Oh, no, well, actually, let's just... How do you contact us?
Well, Zach, first, thank you to Steven, who wasn't able to be on the segment, but he is Translatosaurus on Twitter. You are Zach_Logan on Twitter. I'm Edward DeFestizu on Twitter. But as for the podcast, you can go to OnePiecePodcast.com, Twitter.com, YouTube.com, and Facebook.com/OnePiecePodcast. OnePiecePodcast@gmail.com is our email address. One Piece Podcast is our Skype name. OnePiecePodcast.tumblr.com for news updates and funny pictures. Let's see.
SoundCloud, iTunes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can subscribe on SoundCloud. You can subscribe on the Stitcher Smart Radio app. Subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, or call us on our phone number. Zach?
And that phone number is 347-497-MAJI.
Maji.
That phone number again is 347-497-6254. Call anytime.
Time.
With your questions, comments, and theories.
About aliens.
About aliens, exclusively. Next week, we're going to have the Dude joining us for his first episode of the read-through. We're happy about that. We're also going to have the editor of the volumes, barring any changes, Urian Brown, who is currently the editor of Weekly Shonen Jump, but he actually edited, I think, exactly volumes 13 through 18 at VIZ. So we're looking forward to having him on and hearing what went behind the editing process at that time, which is some time ago, I think, at this point. We have a lot of other really cool guests coming in the next few weeks, including former editor Jason Thompson, Alexi Kirsch. Bryan will be back, of course. Miles will be back, I think a little while from now, but he'll be back. And a lot more. So stay tuned. We're going to be doing these every Thursday from now on. That was our only break last week. We're going to be going through the end of August, doing every single volume of One Piece that is currently available. So please,
loving every minute of it.
Please join us. Please hashtag OPReadthrough. If you're reading along, take pictures. You guys have been great with it. It's really, really cool to see people reading along with us and seeing which parts stick out to them and going through a lot of details. We can't really go on this podcast without it running around 7 hours instead of what I assume is 3 hours, which is still too long. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed the last one. Please tell your friends to read and watch One Piece. And for the One Piece podcast, my name is Zach.
My name is Ed.
We'll see you next week, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.